Hello, and thank you for tuning in to blockchaingamer.biz and our weekly roundup of all the latest news in Web3 gaming. To make sure you don't miss any of our stories, go on blockchaingamer.biz and follow us on Twitter at BCGBiz. Today is Friday, the 2nd of February. I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Into February.
Say that again.
Into February already.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
No sort of massive breakthroughs or headlines this week. It's been a little bit quiet, but we have had a release of a mobile strategy game, Heroes of Mavia, from Spanish studios. Vietnamese studios. Sorry, look at that from. Good start. Vietnamese studios. Christ. We have the drama surrounding Binance Labs and their investment or non-investment, however you like to see it, into SkyArk, and that was followed by the Army of Fortune metaverse, AOFverse, and some controversies surrounding the NFT mint. Which has then sort of raised the question of NFT whales and their sort of impact on the NFT market. Maybe not always so healthy impact on it. We'll discuss that more. But it's given us a sort of insight into how it's not always sort of straightforward, black and white, one-sided stories, which we often tend to see. Oh, why are they doing a rug like that or whatever? But it's often much more complex scenarios than that. And we have also had some insight given into kind of ecosystems wanting to sort of take the opportunity to get new developers joining their networks with, let's get this right, with Optimism and CK Sync, both publishing proposals in trying to get the Treasure DAO to join them and build their treasure chain on their ecosystems. So it's not sort of a fight or a big drama around it, but it's been interesting to see sort of how they argue for why Treasure DAO is a perfect fit, sort of why their values align with their sort of values. Talk more about that later as well. We have had a funding round of Pixelmon announcing they raised 8 million for their games. And John, you have been talking to one of the smartest men in Web3 gaming, who is running one of the most popular blockchain game, but more about that later. So let's start off with Heroes of Mavia.
Yep. So, as you say, Heroes of Mavia, mobile strategy game, very much sort of inspired by Clash of Clans. So in terms of gameplay, very much like a base building game, and then you build your armies and go and attack other people's bases and nick their resources. So that's sort of the Web 2 gameplay type stuff. Obviously, the Web 3 stuff comes in. You have land NFTs that give you extra sort of resources. They have this Ruby resource in game, and they have obviously down the line as well a whole bunch of stuff around alliances and tournaments, all that sort of stuff. So it's been in development for quite a while. They've been testing it for a lot of last year in sort of soft launch. Finally come out yesterday globally through the app stores. So being on the app stores obviously limits what you can sort of do in terms of the blockchain side of things. Doesn't look like there's much blockchain features in there at the moment. So you can sort of attach your wallet to your game. And their token, the Mavia token, is going live on the 6th of February next week. So one sort of key thing they're doing is if you download the game and connect your wallet, then you're going to get a allocation, imagine a fairly small one, but an allocation of the Mavia token. Quite what the Mavia token is going to be used for, I don't think it's used in the game because they have this Ruby sort of currency in the game. And the Mavia token is like a governance token outside of the game. Obviously, you can't really at the moment have sort of blockchain or crypto within a app because Apple and Google don't like doing those sort of things. So I mean, you probably could do it, but it's complicated. So I'm not doing that. So we'll sort of see, like a lot of these things, the launch is the sort of start point for what they're going to do over.
It's been a good start for them, hasn't it? Over 100,000 downloads already, which I think overwhelmed the team. And when I tried to connect my wallet yesterday, it just did not work, and the game was sort of lagging quite a bit due to probably a lot of more players than they had expected. But that's kind of a good problem to have, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've partly because they've got this airdrop thing in there. They've got. It seems like when you go to connect your sort of a game account to your wallet, they have a they're using a third-party sort of authentication system, so that puts extra friction in there, and obviously they don't want to be giving out loads of tokens to bots, so that's sort of slowing them down a little bit on that side. But it's sort of what you have to do. I guess the other interesting thing was. Is that if you look at, they actually published this, so it's not like any investigative work I've done, but they publish a list of the top 10 land holders. So this land NFT has been out since 2022, I think. And the top 10, I mean, the number one landholder is actually the developer itself. So it's got a lot of land that it's presumably going to still sell or give away or whatever it wants to do. But all the other sort of top 9 are guilds. So a lot of familiar names on there. YGG, actually Animoca, which isn't a guild, but that has a bunch of stuff. I think probably they've invested. And I think that's actually the top one. Let me think. Top one was GuildFi. Avocado were there. Perion were there, and these were all guilds that sort of started off when Axie Infinity got very popular in 2021. Had this scholarship model, and that model worked really well for about 2 months, and then didn't work at all. But in that time, a lot of these guilds sort of launched their own cryptocurrencies, their own tokens, which they sort of launched well and raised a bunch of money, raised millions of dollars for them. But then the business model had totally changed. So they've been sort of struggling for really the last sort of 2 years. So it'll be interesting to see now. They've had these assets. I think in the case of GuildFi, in thousands of lands. So it's going to probably get tens of thousands of dollars worth of tokens, maybe even more. I don't know what the token price is. So it'll be interesting to see whether those people just sort of try and resurrect their sort of play to earn communities, because they've got all these lands and they've got all these tokens, so they can start getting thousands of people potentially to play their games, use the land, all that sort of stuff, or whether they just sort of go, right, we've got this free money, let's just sort of dump it and sort of recover some losses. So I have no insight into how those guilds are. They've all tried to sort of pivot a little bit, but this is sort of a long awaited sort of a payday for them. So I guess I think that will show a certain amount of sort of sentiment of whether those guilds, whether they just sort of want to get some money out of the system, or whether they sort of like, right, here we go again, it's going to be a bull market, let's all sort of pile in and start to try and reinvent our model. So that'll be interesting to see next week.
Now, looking at the game itself, I mean, you used to play Clash of Clans back in the day, and quite an avid journalist covering a lot around that. But is it similar? Would it in any way, compare to sort of a Web2 success game like that, or?
Well, it's hard to judge. Hard to only been out for a day. It's pretty slow actually to begin with, I would say. No, I mean, it's different. So it is sort of proper 3D in the way that's just, Clash of Clans over 10 years old now. Well over 10 years old. It was just sort of much simpler in terms of graphical stuff. So I don't think you can't compare. Supercell are one of the best game development companies ever.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think on a sort of straight fight you'd play Clash of Clans over Heroes of Mavia. I mean, even stuff like little things like the icon on the App Store is just, I think, very poor. I don't like the character design very much. I mean, I'm being hypercritical here, but if it was just a Web2 game, it wouldn't go anywhere. I mean, it just wouldn't,
Okay.
But obviously the point is, it's not just a Web2 game, it's a Web2 game with Web3 stuff in it. So the point, people are going to download it because they might get a $5 airdrop. So immediately you expect to see a difference there. I think it's probably good enough. I don't think it's going to I think it's necessarily going to get millions of downloads, or millions of players, I should say. But I think the Web3. I mean, you never sort of know. I think Web3 gives it an advantage if it plays that well. I think it's playing that well at the moment. Obviously the crypto market's coming back a bit, so there's a bit more interest in maybe people just sort of randomly trying this sort of stuff. Normally with these games, they are successful or not successful on what we call live ops. So that's basically updating them. In some cases, some of these games are updated. Bits of those games are updated every day. So in the big sort of APAC RPGs, they have teams of 100 people every day. They're putting different retailing things in there, different skins, different little mini games you can play. I mean, it's very, very, very competitive. This game is not going to have that level. So I don't think we should damn it in a month's time for it not being a massive success, because it is what it is. It's and it's going to be a bit more of a long sort of, not a long process, but it's going to be a sort of a longer sort of process, I think, for it to,
in line with a sort of a whole Web3 kind of adoption, really.
Yeah, I think so. But I think there's in terms of there's not a lot of other games out there, I think, in the Web3 side that have the level of quality that it does have, and they've been working at this for a while. So good luck to them.
Good. Right, let's move on to the drama around the Sky Arc and AFOS. You wrote quite a bit about that this week. And the NFT whale Dingaling has been quite outspoken on this matter.
Yeah.
So can you talk us through, Jen, a little bit more in detail what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an ongoing, it seems to be like a bit of an ongoing trend now, and it's been out for a while, to be honest. But people who bought NFTs at certain stages of the cycle, who felt they were promised something in the future that they feel hasn't been fulfilled. So it could just be, at some level that could be teams just being a total rug and nicking the money. On other levels, it could be teams in experience and not being able to fulfill the promises that they had. In other cases, it could be just it's really hard to make games. It takes a lot longer than you think. So we've seen a bit of everything sort of this week. So I guess it kicked off with Sky Arc, which is making a whole bunch of sort of RPG games, and they were having an NFT drop where you had to bid for the NFTs. So they were trying to sort of obviously juice that by getting people to try and bid as much. It was within fixed limits, but so previously to that, they put out a statement saying they'd raised $15 million, which at the time seemed a bit weird because $15 million is quite a lot, and they're not like a massively renowned team. And they were saying Binance Labs led our investment, 15 million. Here's all the people who invested. And at the time, we thought it was a bit sketchy, and it was particularly sketchy because the day after that announcement went out, the tweet got deleted. So we're a little bit unsure what was going on. And obviously they were doing that to get people interested in their NFT drop, and that was very successful. They had $115 million worth of bids for $15 million worth of NFTs. Unfortunately for them, the day after the NFT sort of bidding system finished, Binance Labs put out their own tweet saying, we were not part of this $15 million round. We did not lead it. And so what it transpired was $15 million was the money, all the money they have ever raised over the last 2 years. Binance Labs was the first money into them because they went through a Binance Labs incubator in 2021. So Binance Labs had led that original pre-seed round. It's not very clear how the 15 million has been invested in different rounds. There's a lot of it's very opaque. So it wasn't a straight out lie. I don't think it was. Clearly they were trying to juice something, and they got a bit carried away. Inexperienced team. Binance said, "Can you take this? Can you clarify this?" And they just deleted the tweet. And obviously, much better off if they just clarified it. And then it became like all these sort of things. The crime is not the big issue. It's always the sort of the cover up. And it's not that they covered it up, but it was as soon as the sort of the facts came out, then obviously people were very sort of angry that they, I wouldn't have bid on this NFT if I knew blah blah blah. So there was that sort of little thing going on, and then because there's a lot of token drops happening or airdrops or tokens NFT sales and stuff. There's quite a lot of this stuff now happening. There was also a thing with Valhalla, which I won't really go into, but that was a PFP project that was going to be like a sort of Web3 gaming sort of brand, a bit like Azuri, which was always the criticism of it. The things look very much like Azuri. It was quite successful when it launched. A team had already raised some money to do like a streaming gaming service, which hasn't really transpired because those things are hard to do. And then the CEO suddenly announced out of nowhere they were doing a mechanical keyboard, which was going to be super expensive. They can only make 300 of them, and if you had an NFT,
better be a good one.
No, I'm
the
sure it will be,
thing.
but as all the people pointed out, well, that's all fine and good, but that wasn't on the road. Nowhere at any point did you mention you were doing a mechanical keyboard. And he was saying, we're going to sell these, and we're going to make a loss. So it's like, what are you doing? So obviously it's a little bit, again, inexperience. He probably just wanted to make a mechanical keyboard, and so it's just sort of random sort of stuff that these sort of young, they're fairly young kids who've raised a bunch of money. They'd raised some money from decent VC, so it's all a bit confusing. But anyway, there was a bit of a kick off about that, and then it all sort of, from a narrative in the week, sort of culminated in AOF verse, and they're I think they're based sort of Chinese based, well, not based in China, but sort of Singapore, I suppose. I think Hong Kong. And they again are another mobile team. They actually have a game live on the app stores, which is, again, I can't see. I've played it fine as a game, but can't see much Web3 in there. And they were doing their token drop, launching their token, and they launched some NFTs last year, and it all got a bit out of hand because it was just when everything was sort of getting bullish again. So lots of people had bought these NFTs, and I think they sort of said through various conversations that they felt a little bit they weren't in control of it, because these sort of whales were coming in and buying up a lot of these NFTs for very expensive prices, much more expensive than they thought. And I think there you sort of sometimes see the disconnect between sort of the degens who just like pile in, we're going to make tons of money, these NFTs are going to go to the moon, we're going to get loads of tokens, and the projects who sort of realize, well, this is what we think the token, they have no idea what the token's going to be launched at, or what they're selling the token at in pre-sale, so they sort of know the figures better than the degens do. So what it transpired was that this guy Dingaling, who had 143 of these tokens, so 6% of the total supply, he sort of said, this team's rubbish. They're not listening to the NFT holders. It's an insult, the amount of tokens we've been offered, which is sort of not really fair, because when they did the NFT drop, it was a free mint. There was an assumption you would get tokens, but they hadn't said what the token allocation was going to be. So he was all high and mighty, and I never normally dump these tokens, but I'm going to make a stand and dump these tokens. And so the price of the tokens dumped, because he dumped 6% of the total supply. And there was all this to and froing from them. And what it transpired was really that there had been negotiations between some of the NFT holders, presumably Dingaling, and the team, and they'd come to a negotiation about what amount of tokens would be dropped to NFT holders, and you have a vesting thing. So you have an allocation of tokens, but you can't sell them all at once. So you may have, in this case, like a 3-month cliff, they call it. So you can't sell for 3 months. Then at the end of that period of time, you can maybe sell 10%, and then another 5% every month. So there's a sort of a distribution over time in which you can sell them. And I think the developer thought they'd agreed with these NFT holders what the allocation was going to be, and then at the last minute, Dingaling, presumably, came back and said he wanted 5 times more, and to be able to sell some immediately. And they said, no, that's not fair on these other people who don't have NFTs but have been playing our games. And so it was a bit of sort of a storm in a teacup, really. And neither side, particularly Dingaling, I think, had been very, honest is maybe the wrong word, but hadn't been very transparent.
I suppose.
Yeah, so he'd sort of placed himself on this pedestal of, I'm not doing it for the money, I'm doing it for the principle. Where it actually transpired that he wouldn't have done that if he'd got his money out. So I don't think. From my point of view, I don't have any NFTs. I have no skin in this game. I think the Dingaling comes off worse than AOF verse, who I don't think. I think they're, again, an inexperienced team. They sort of said, we are some of the founders of Supercell, where it transpires that the CTO was like just a coder in one of their Supercell's early games, and the CEO of AOK, is it AOK? AOF verse was the third community manager for Clash of Clans, which is not a senior role at all. So yeah. They were not founders. They were sort of they were early into Supercell, but they were not they were not high level execs in Supercell. So that's I think that's poor. So sort of no one comes out of it well, really. But I think it just goes to show that these things, this is why blockchain is really complicated, and why people you can't really, in a sense, sort of trust people's motivations for things, because there's money involved and there's reputation, and why I think that's sort of part of the in some ways it's sort of is a feature or a bug. The whole point about blockchain is don't trust, verify. I mean, these sort of things are sort of quite hard because you can't be out in the open. But obviously, if they had a DAO and they put forward a proposal to the DAO and people voted on it, that would sort of be the way you would sort of do it. Not that DAOs can't be manipulated by NFT whales and stuff like that, but at least it would all be out in the open. So it's sort of that's the conclusion to draw. The details are messy. Maybe there's another layer behind all the stuff.
Probably stuff we don't know as well. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It's always the case. Thanks for clearing that up for us a bit. So this week we published an interview. The interview was actually done last week, I think, where you spoke to Pixel's founders and CEO Luke Barwikowski, and it's on our website. It's a good interview, I thought, quite eye-opening. I did not know that, he has all this experience since a very young age of coding and making games, and it's like such a deep involvement in the sort of economy around. Obviously, you would know, you could sense that, but to actually hear from himself, explaining his sort of education and economy and stuff is interesting. I thought. What did you make of the interview? You were the one.
No, it was one of the favourite ones I've done, because I didn't know anything of him at all. I'd not spoken to him before, so it came across very, very well, I thought. And as you say, we talked a bit about sort of Pixels, the project. I mean, personally, I'm not super interested in that. It's not sort of a game for me, really. But what was really interesting was, I think he almost like personifies this sort of he's in a sense he's inexperienced, in a sense he's very experienced, but this is sort of like the sort of crypto natives almost who are really, I think, going to drive the industry forward over the next sort of decade, 2 decades. So quick. If I can remember it all right, get the ages right. So he started coding at 12, started making little games at 12. I mean, that's not that uncommon. I started coding when I was 11, but I never made a game. He started mining Bitcoin when he was 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Obviously, like everyone did at the time, he sold it all for like $100. But then he obviously did computer science at university, also did economics. And he said economics professors hated Bitcoin. And he actually went off, he didn't really follow up on crypto. So he, all the bull market stuff in 2017, 2018, he didn't, he was almost like anti Bitcoin, even despite having mined it. And then he went to Silicon Valley and did some sort of startups there. And he had this sort of what he called a sort of spatial video chat sort of startup that wasn't really going anywhere, but some people there had an NFT collection they wanted them to integrate into this sort of into this software. He didn't really want to do it, but because the company wasn't going anywhere, he sort of said, we'll sort of do it. And that worked out really well. That was 2021, so it's just when Axie was kicking off and all the NFT stuff was kicking off, and I think he sort of, because he'd had this long gestation of thinking about, obviously being in the computer, being a coder, and then obviously thinking about the economic sort of value of Bitcoin and blockchains, that at that point he started to see real use cases and sort of piled in, and that's when Pixel started. So that was sort of interesting that, he's not a game developer, but he's making, a game, which, I mean, it's a sort of game social sort of network, so it's not a sort of pure game in that sense. What was also interesting, though, was he said as a teenager, he basically played RuneScape, which is this very well-known MMORPG from Jagex in the UK. At one point was, it was probably the equivalent of Fortnite. So basically every teenage kid played it. It wasn't free to play, so you paid a monthly subscription. So they never actually made that much money out of it because they didn't have in-game items. They do now, but they didn't at the time. But that's just sort of the nativeness of his experiences. So he grew up coding, he understood Bitcoin, and he played this MMORPG every day with his friends. That was how they socialized. So, it's no great surprise that he's made Pixels, which is a blockchain-based social sort of MMORPG. Well, that's sort of where it's going. So, yeah, I really was really impressed by him. He was sort of, we'll see how it works out. He's gone through a lot of stuff and built this, company and made some good decisions, but he sort of has that fearless nature of someone who's just like, here we go. And, he sort of said they're calling it Pixels Chapter 2, and he said we're going to rip out a whole bunch of stuff and totally rebuild it, which, I'm sure he can do it, but obviously there's certain risks coming with that. And he's just saying, well, if it's a short-term pain and we lose users, because we're going to have more long-term success, then that's sort of fine. And obviously, that's the startup spirit. That's what we sort of want.
No, exactly. That's what struck me really when listening to the kind of mindset he has. They were popular on Polygon. In fact, the most popular game on Polygon, and they still decided to migrate to Ronin, and obviously found huge success in that. And then even now, sort of saying that if we don't like something, we just stop it. We just switch it off and start something else. Or if we find that something doesn't work, that he's not afraid at all of trying new things and innovate. And it's just such a healthy sort of positive outlook. So yeah, definitely worth a listen. A great interview. Right. Last, we are looking at optimism, and CK thinks sort of trying to woo Treasure DAO over to their ecosystems. So talk us through that, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess this goes back to the sort of transparency thing. So, Treasure DAO, as the name suggests, is a DAO. It's been going for 2 or 3 years, and it's sort of very much trying to. It was sort of the first sort of gaming ecosystem in the sense to where they wanted to have not just sort of be on the same chain, obviously, but sort of have a quite tightly integrated sort of system that every game in Treasure DAO using their magic token would have, would sit within this sort of system where they have their own ID, so you have Treasure ID, they have their own marketplace. It's very sort of vertically integrated, as we would say. And I think that, the term has been used. I don't know from them, but the Nintendo of Web3 gaming. That's sort of what their byline was. Hard to pull off, but anyway. So that's what they've been. They've been operating away on that for a while. There's quite a lot of games in there. I would say not many of those are sort of they're more sort of experimental indie stuff at the moment. There's not really any big breakout hits there. Although they sort of had a big headline when Mighty Action Heroes moved from Polygon to Treasure DAO last year, so that's a fairly anticipated game. So they are going to do a treasure chain. So I think that's going to be an L2. At the moment, they're operating on Arbitrum, which itself is an L2, Ethereum-based L2. And I don't really follow Treasure that much, but it seems like there's some optionality around doing this treasure chain. Obviously, they could just do it on Arbitrum, where they are sort of one of the big players in Arbitrum gaming, and obviously have good links to Arbitrum. But then on their DAO sort of proposals website, then Optimism, which is a sort of rival Ethereum-based L2, who has just they have a really good biz dev team now. So the biz dev team from there used to biz dev Polygon, so they were behind the sort of success of Polygon with lots of people like Starbucks and people like that. So a very competent team, and obviously they're out to juice up Optimism, gaming on Optimism, because there's not a lot of gaming on Optimism at the moment. So they've just put in a proposal saying you should come to Optimism, we're really great, blah, 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 blah. And then like a couple of days later, someone did exactly the same from ZK Zinc, which is another rival Ethereum L2. So it's sort of quite funny that they're basically sort of touting themselves out there. And these are proposals, so the Treasure people can vote on them. The interesting bit, really, I suppose, is what sort of token grants you would get. So, you would definitely. I imagine if I was Treasure DAO, I'd be like, well, we like Arbitrum, but if you offers $100 million of tokens, maybe we'd move, sort of thing. So there's no mention of that sort of grant system yet. So we'll sort of see. But I guess it's sort of it is very blockchain. It is sort of, as you say, quite funny that it doesn't seem to be. There's no. It's almost like a fun thing. Almost, it's not like a nasty thing. People are trying to sort of stab each other in the back.
No. And every week we see this now, don't we? There's not only games launching; it's basically a new gaming chain launching every week almost.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the high chain
and ecosystems migrating. The whole sort of catalog of tech over to new chain, and
I mean, high chain went live this week from Hytopia. Immutable, ZK, EVM mainnet went live this week. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of this sort of stuff, and this is the time when people are basically, I think, making decisions that will be maybe long term, maybe just medium term decisions on infrastructure, because infrastructure is just a big play at the moment, and people want to get on fast, cheap chains, and that will be a sort of key thing for going a bit more mass market.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Well, we're going to round up. So thank you very much, John, and thank you very much for listening. And we will see you all next week again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.